I remember once I heard a story about these people who live far up in the northern edge of Greenland, up in the Arctic Circle. They were then called Arctic Highlanders, but I believe they now have some indigenous name. I'm not sure how exactly, but over 1,000 years ago they somehow got separated from civilization, and they lived out there, and everything there was ice, and it was so far ice in every direction that they thought they were the only people in the world. There were less than 1,000 of them, and they thought this, and they believed that they could never leave this place. They thought that a certain distance away from where they lived there was a great wall of ice and they could never get out. Anyway, they were discovered by Westerners about 200 years ago, by Western explorers. And then, about 50 years after that, an American explorer named Peary went there. He went there actually several times. And the fourth time, he decided to take some of these people back to America to be studied or something. I'm not sure exactly what for. There were 4 adults and 2 children. And when they came back to America, as is common with indigenous peoples when they first meet Westerners, a lot of them fell sick. And in fact, I believe all of them died except one, a small child whose name was Minic. And Minic was very upset that his father was dead, and he wanted his father to have a proper Eskimo funeral, as it were. But they wanted to keep the body for study. So to try and keep the boy happy, they made up a mock funeral for him and had a coffin and everything. And for a while he was happy, and he lived with, I think it was the curator of the museum where they were in New York. And for some years he was happy. But a few years later, sadly for young Minic, he was visiting the museum and he came across his father's skeleton on display in one of the cabinets. Naturally, he was rather upset, and he wanted to get his father's bones back and send them back to his home for a proper burial. And he mounted a legal challenge, but there wasn't really anything he could do. And ultimately, he went back to Greenland without them. But when he came back to, his home in the northern Greenland, the Arctic Highlanders, he found that he'd forgotten how to speak his own language and how to hunt and all of these other various things. And so after a few years, he went back to America again to start again. But then, unluckily enough, when he came back again, he came back at the time when there was the great Spanish flu outbreak, and he died in that. And he never did get his father's bones back, and they stayed in the museum for decades afterwards.